Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Game Changing Work Show, where we're all about influencing the future of work. And we talk about subjects from outcome centric approaches to the modern leadership in teams, and also science backed performance and well being approaches. And so today, our topic is all about outcome driven product roadmaps. And so we're going to talk about three reasons why you should consider shifting in 2022 from feature driven to outcome driven. And today we have our guest, Joanna Tivig. And hello, myself, Veronica Stewart, your outcome oriented agility and OKR coach, and Roxana, our team based leadership coach. And so Joanna is our special guest, who is a product coach and author. She's been an instructor of the University of Toronto, the School of Continuing Studies, for over a decade, and teaching these courses of product management and project management. And you're currently the co-founder of New Gen P. And thank you so much for coming and joining. And this is the second time having
Yes,
Joanna back. And I figured, it was time to bring up some product talk because it's so related to when we talk about outcome centric customer centricity, which is all about the future, right? Of companies moving in that direction. And so, without further ado, let's get started with today's conversation.
and thank you for inviting me. I mean, I'm here for the second time. That's a good omen, I guess. I love to have these conversations with you. So I'm always challenged and exciting. So I love the participation and I love how we talk about things. So thank you again.
So good to have you here and thinking about the second time. Like, I think we already have plans for the third time, for the
Yes.
charm of the third time, right? Because we already had some interesting conversations backstage. So it's always fascinating. So, okay,
Yeah.
so here we go for today discussing outcome driven roadmaps.
Yep.
And I think we agreed that we're going to start with why do we even need to shift? Why do we need to do things different?
Right. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing definitely the need of a shift, of a change, but is it actually like a sustainable shift that is happening? Is it more at the executive level and the executives want to shift and then the actual workers they ask why? Why do we need to shift? I mean, things are working very well. And as we were talking about it, like organizations' shares are at the historical top. We're making a lot of money. I see the Canadian company, they've had a great year despite the pandemic, despite of everything that's happening in the market. And they may wonder, why do we need to even move to a different direction or do things differently when things are actually working for us? So I guess the big question is, um, where do we go from here? Because we always need to encourage progress. We always need to encourage change. And even if we had a great year and doing very well, it's always good to think about change, to think about how we bring something new to the organization, and also challenge the market, challenge our employees. We've also touched on market and the employees and the great uh, resignation that is happening right now. So with that, like, what do we need to do in order to encourage that shift, encourage that progress? in the organization. So that's what I see in Canada. I see more of that reluctance. Things are going very, very well. I don't know, Veronica, for you, if you see
I don't know if it's my end, but
same
it's a little getting cut out.
trends.
No, it's on my end as well. I think Joanna's internet connection is a bit
That
slow.
shift.
So if I heard correctly, the question was directed to see what the trends were actually happening here in the United States, and there's a couple of different things. We know that a lot of industries have been quite profitable, but really where the shift is starting to turn is not necessarily the profitable, but some of them
Can you
have
hear
had profitable
me,
and they're
or do we
You're
have
getting cut
some
off.
problems?
It's like yeah.
yeah.
It's the second time is not as sharpful as the first time round, but I'm sure we can get it fixed.
So just to continue answering your question, is there's a combination
Anyone
of
here?
things that we can hear you. Yeah. So getting back to answering the question is that in the United States, we see a lot of couple things because some, as I was mentioning, some companies have had huge growth potential over the last year and a half, and that growth potential comes with growing pains. And sometimes when you're in that startup mode, there are certain things that they're addressing that might be more attractive of how to bring their strategy. Now, the conversation of outcomes may be there or may not be there. It may not be the top of the list. Like, for example, OKRs are getting more popular, but not necessarily the conversation about the outcomes in OKRs, right? They're more concerned about their strategy and execution and the alignment happening. The other thing that you're seeing out there a lot today is the employee experience, because we are here in the United States having that great resignation. There's a lot of turnover. People are worried about attrition out there today. So
Can you hear?
Can and can't. You probably I don't know if you're hearing me right now.
But you're frozen. Your image is
Yeah.
frozen, Joanna.
Yeah. So just to kind of quickly wrap up, it's the sense of urgency is there. The question is, what are they most urgent about? And so, but there's a land of opportunity right now because going back to that attrition and attracting top talent, there's a lot of speculation of what are the reasons why people are leaving, right, and not staying. And one of them is it varies, and it's all about engagement and motivation. And some people are questioning is, do I really like my job? Versus just the whole point of working from home and remote. So I think it's more of, we're not really sure on all those entire dynamics that are happening out there. I think it's a lot of speculation today. Some might have a better grip within their companies, but we're realizing that there's a disconnect, and it's been brought up between the leaders and what have you. That's why Microsoft came out with Microsoft Viva, right? And trying to connect that so people have better insights and the leaders have better connections with their employees in real time. So going back to outcome-driven product roadmaps and there's a need to do something different because something's happening in their culture that is there are people inspired to want to be more outcome driven. This OKR is inspiring. You got the product led transformation getting more popular, right? There's conferences happening next year. So you're having the business side of the house here in the US. Some of they're the drivers of some of these changes, right? When it comes to OKRs and being outcome centric. And I'm going to just say even the employee experience, because HR and culture sits on the business side of the house. So all these combinations of things is driving what I would call the think different motto, But the question is, what is different in 2022? And that's where the opportunity is. Those of you that are wanting to do differently in how we treat product today and wanting to move more in that customer centric way, this is the great topic today about, well, what about your roadmaps? What about moving from feature driven roadmaps to outcome centric roadmaps and why that is important?
And I think you touched on a very different distinction here, and this is what Joanna started to talk about it before she froze. So I hope we're getting her back, because I really hope that we can benefit from her insights as well. But it's true that Canada is pretty different than the US, because and again, that doesn't mean things are not going to change. That doesn't mean um, people are not going to challenge the status quo, but we don't see the great resignation here the way that we talk about it in the United States. So it's a matter of, okay, it still works, um, but the question is, will everything still work like that on the long run? That's what you want to think about when we're talking about plans. And moving into 2020, I think this is what we see. This is what my experience has been with hybrid work as well. Like, can we
What are the
really address it in a way in which it's going to be useful for everybody, and it's going to be a valuable conversation, and we're actually going to be productive? Because just because people don't resign, that does not mean that they're productive or motivated or engaged. Maybe they're just waiting for a good moment at which they can resign. Maybe they're planning their resignation. And actually, last time we were talking to Alex, our talent acquisition expert, and he was saying people have been planning their moves for years, not months.
And he's
So
based in
just
Canada, right?
exactly. So just because you don't see the movement at the surface level of the water, just because the tip of the iceberg is still there, does that mean that you have a solid foundation underneath? Does
Like,
that mean that there's movement underneath that you might not even think about?
are we the leaders of what might be, right? And
Yep.
are and we're in reactive mode where you could be in proactive mode
Yeah.
if you want to look at it in that perspective. But kind of
Yeah.
getting back to the point of like today's conversation about outcome driven roadmaps is, why do we even care? What's the
Joanna,
value
you're
in that?
back. Yes.
Yeah,
Woohoo.
I hope I'm back. I think
You
it's just
are.
stabilizing. I don't know what
Yeah.
happened there. So my computer was thinking on its own. So technology. Um,
Technology. Yes.
so yeah, so for sure. I mean, I guess also why are we doing these product roadmaps? So I see the product roadmaps are existent in organizations where I go and I work for sure. People need to see a high level plan of some sort of things that are coming down the pipe, so they can actually get an idea what's going to happen. But I do see that these roadmaps, they are more than plans, or they are more than schedules. They need to be focused on impacts, focused on changes that are happening, focusing on how we can actually influence the customer, we can influence the organization, driven by the benefits. And back to your discussion about objectives and key results, like how do we measure these outcomes as they coming in? Like what are those results looking like? And they need to be very specific in order for us to be able to measure them, because otherwise it's no point. So definitely seeing that trend, but also asking ourselves why are we creating product roadmaps? What is the benefit at the end of the day of having these plans that will tell us how the features of a certain product will look like, and then thinking about what those impacts would be. So it's great to have outcomes driven roadmaps, because, as I mentioned, they are closer to measuring, they are closer to how we connect them to the impacts that we making to the customers. And also, it's a great way for the team to actually figure things out.
Yeah.
So we create them for executives because they want to see the big picture, but it should be for employees and for the team as well, because the team will actually look at that and say, oh, okay, so I am creating that change. I will make sure that the customer has a great experience because it's part of the work that I do. And I find sometimes I am with teams, and when I ask them, why are we here? What are we trying to achieve? They say, oh, we need to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, and then what's happening after that delivery? Oh, I don't know. The project will finish, because it's all about the project and it's all about the delivery of those features. So I do see that it's a lot of pressure for product owners and product managers in general, to just get something out there and deliver. So and again, at the end of the day, it's not about the delivery. At the end of the day, it's about the impact that we are making.
Yeah, I put a quote on the post that I had today, and it said, "Roadmaps fail when they present a picture of the future that is at odds with what we know about the future." And so it's making assumptions when we're doing future driven that we actually know everything. And we know today's market that we only know what we know. And
Yeah.
so part of the outcomes, and I think this is something, is to make sure people actually understand the difference between outcomes. Outcomes is about driving human behavior, the behavior change. And so when we're talking about customers, that's where the customer centricity comes, is really understanding who your customers are and trying to understand what are the behaviors that are actually going to drive that change, that's actually connected to driving your impact, to what Joanna was saying, which, if we take that on a business perspective, is that strategic intent, right? The business results. And so if you're already starting and assuming you know what that is, then all that, and I put this post today, you can spend all this time researching, you can spend all this time planning and all this time executing, and by the time it gets out there in the hands, how do we know that it was successful? And if we find out it wasn't that successful, it didn't even drive to the things that we needed. I've had stories where companies spent a lot of money developing something and they couldn't even sell it.
Hmm. Yeah. I believe you, because at the end of the day, it's all about that. Let's get it out. Let's just release it, and we release it, and people don't use it, and that's okay. That should be feedback for all of us to say, hey, we need to try something else. We need to change our approaches because it's not working. So sometimes we just do it for experimentation. Sometimes we just do it because there is a lot of pressure to
Yeah.
do it.
Now, we have three reasons, which we're already starting to get into. And we probably, let's highlight reason number one, which is outcomes align better with goals. And
Yeah.
so we know psychologically, if we take the science behind everything in relation to goals, we know it naturally provides that North Star. It's a natural motivator. It helps people feel engaged. They have more clarity, and it gives them the opportunity to be critical thinkers and problem solvers, because it provides that fit space. I have a goal, but I'm not telling you how. Kind of what you were
Mhm.
alluding to, Joanna. And
Yeah.
what say you else about the reason number one about how they align better?
So there is one thing that I found very interesting. Roman Pichler said something that I found very insightful, and said that outcomes provide continuity of purpose. Okay, so it's based to back and back to that reason why. So what's the purpose of doing what we're doing? And that's why we need to have those goals, because those goals will set that purpose, will set the why. And the goals will tell us, like, why do we need to do something at the end of the day, for what we think we should do. So for that what, because at the strategy of the organization, so we have the those strategies that organizations put together, and then we translate those strategies through these goals, because otherwise, like, we cannot put the we cannot relate to that strategy. So that's why when we're thinking about, we have the strategy, then we have the goals, then we have these outcomes that connect to the goals, and it's part of that entire product life cycle. And that's why we talk about product roadmaps, and we're not talking about project roadmaps, because projects are just those temporary things that we are enabling in order to get all this going and to create these products and the features. So outcomes basically map all that through the product life cycle.
Yeah, and there's another thing also when I talk about strategy, people, and process, and outcomes at the center. When we naturally do projects, and if you have a feature, most of the time you're just going to do what you already know, your way of thinking and the way you get to action to be able to do that, right? Because you're already at the output. When you are having an outcomes driven roadmap, or just outcomes in general, outcomes actually drive natural change, because what it does, again, it's all about behavior change. And
Right.
so now you've opened the space and gave a goal, but you didn't tell someone how to do it. And sometimes they have to be challenged to go, wait a minute,
Yeah.
maybe in order to get that goal, I have to actually do something different, because what I'm doing right now isn't going to get it. And so it naturally creates that natural change
Yeah.
inherently on how you work, and maybe even the solution to it, right? And so for me, when you talk about align better to goals, that's pretty powerful, because
Yes.
it creates a lot more than I think people think about. It's not just the product. We're talking about people and process along with it too.
Right.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to say. It aligns people to goals because it gives them the how. Like, how are we going to get there? What do we need to? And there's like, that's why I always love to do this exercise whenever I do the team stuff, because we always go through, what do we need to stop doing, start doing, and continue doing. And that gives it's like, and it's, when you're talking about outcomes and aligning with goals, it's that you understand what it is that you need to change now so that you can actually get to those goals. Because otherwise you're stuck in something that, okay, we have the goals, we need to get there, but like, what if we're not getting there the right way? What if we had a plane and we're not flying the plane, we're sailing the boat, and it's going to take us there like so much later? What if we could actually get a plane to get us there? Like, it gives you the opportunity to adapt quicker.
Right.
Yeah, and it and I love where you're going with this, because it initiates the whole point of outcomes is experimentation.
Yeah.
It
Yes, and alignment with that strategy. Remember that we are just thinking that, now we're experimenting to see if that strategy actually is real, because
yeah.
sometimes we do these strategies for 3 years and we realize in the middle of the road that, oh, it's not working. So that's why we need to start that experimentation as soon as possible.
And that kind of leads into reason number two
Yeah.
is outcome allow you to have that measurement to qualify, right? Or quantify that you actually are driving to that strategic intent. And strategy can be for everything, right? So when I talk about strategy, a lot of people only think business strategy. Well, you also, believe it or not, outcomes relate to people strategy. You
Yes.
always say, and I want to kind of bring us back to when you were here the last show about product agility and everything that connects to it. This outcome driven roadmaps really is about people, strategy, and process. It really brings it all together just on a natural perspective. My personal bias opinion.
Of course, and it goes back to that discussion for OKRs, because that's why we said, like, why OKRs are so powerful. What do they bring to the table than just regular objectives?
Yeah.
And the power in those OKRs is those key results that align with the objectives,
Yeah, because they're
because
made
we
to be
are
written outcome focused, not output.
right,
Yeah.
right. So then it's just everything is coming together, because now I can measure. I can say that I am doing this in a percentage wise for the next 2 months. So after the first month, I can actually go in there and say, oh, am I on the right track or not? On the second month, I'm going to go there and say, okay, I had 2 months to do this. Am I there or am I not? But if I just put an objective there and it's just going to be a big what without any other
Yeah.
specifics, any measurable results, anything can happen.
And that's so key because one of the fundamental things that I always bring up everywhere I go is you have to start measuring immediately. Figure out, like, put that as your goal, as a milestone to put the ability to measure by a certain date, right? As one of your key results in your OKRs, because I see it everywhere we go. We're not measuring. Like
Okay.
even these PI objectives in SAFE, and I make fun and say we're only doing SART because we can't even do SMART objectives because they can't even measure yet.
Yeah.
I go, you're
Yeah.
not even doing SMART, you're doing SART.
Yeah. Or we're measuring on the wrong scale as well. This is what
Yeah.
I see. Or we're not aligning the measurement scale to the outcomes, to the goals, and to everything else. And then you get people who will say, well, I've done what was required of me. But the thing is, what was required of you was wrong in the first place,
And
because
that's
it
all
wasn't
about building
aligned
the right
to
thing,
anything else.
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And speaking of building the right thing, which is our reason number 3, is
Yeah.
outcomes or outputs with value.
That's my definition of outcomes and outputs, right? So whenever somebody's asking me what's the difference between outcomes and outputs, I always tell them that outcomes are those outputs. So you are delivering something, you have an output, but they need to have the value. So it's back to also, our original discussion. So we're basically closing the loop, that we really need to look at the value of making an impact. So, is the user or the customer at the end of the day satisfied with what they are seeing? Because if they see value, of course, people pay for value, because that's addressing their need.
Mm-hmm.
That's giving them something that they should look for. So, of course, would we buy a phone without a camera these days? Anyone? Right?
That's
So
a great
we only
question.
buy it because of that camera, right? So
Yeah.
if we don't see that value in the phone, and we wouldn't buy it. So it's something that we really have to think about, because again, in a project environment, so that's the shift from project thinking to product thinking. In a project environment, we care about outputs. We care about those objectives from a project perspective, or deliverables. So we will build a requirements document. That's a great deliverable. That's an output. Okay, what are we achieving with the requirement document? What's the value in that requirement document? Is actually bringing us something? Can we test that we're actually getting something
Garrett loves
out
your
of it?
quote. Thanks,
Thank you,
Garrett.
Gareth.
Yeah, we in kind of getting back to reason 3 as we kind of wrap and close all of this up is ultimately, right? It's really all about impact. And the only way that you know that you're having impact, it could be impact what you're doing in the world, right? Making a difference, impact as a business, impact. Outcomes drive towards getting that result, that impact. And then the outputs are really about all those activities. And so when organizations are focusing on the outputs, how do they know, right? There's like this missing link of connection to actually making a true impact. And so when you
Exactly.
talk about purpose led and you talk about all of these things that are out there, it's like there's a missing piece to it. And that's probably why I got one of the emails from Teresa Torres where I love, thank you, Teresa. She gave this whole list of all the product conferences for next year. It caught my attention. One of the conferences in May or March. Those of you, there's two of them. There's an APAC one and then a USA version, and I forgot the name of it, but now there's this thing called product led transformations. And then they have these 7 T's in within, and they're talking about, well, we've had all these digital transformations, XYZ, and I'm going to just even throw in agile transformations. But there's a reason why there's probably a 70% failure rate in transformations in general. And a lot of why is it so hard to get this outcome conversation into it, right? And so I think there's this whole movement now going, no, no, no. We need a product-led transformation and all these practices that we're talking about. And I'm so curious in 2022, how much is this going to take shape if we're going to hear more about these product-led transformations? I don't know, folks, if you're aware of that. Comment, let us know if you've heard of product-led transformations. Are they getting popular out there? This terminology, because I'm curious. Because I don't think this is the last time we're going to mention this on the show, because it really perked my ears when I saw that in that email about a conference that was all focused on it. Like, I don't know if you saw that, Joanna, but
Yeah.
isn't that's like awesome, right?
It's a conversation we've been having for a couple
Yeah.
of years, in terms of that product transformation. I think it just started with the idea that these transformations are project led. So you initiate a project, a transformation project, and you expect to last 2 years and say, okay, within those 2 years, we're going to do a big transformation in the organization, then we're done, right? So this is when it was like, no, 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 no. You need to think about these are, longer term thing, because you're transforming on one side of your organization, the other side is becoming obsolete. So what are you going to do? Move the tent to the other,
Yeah. If we
department, and then do that. So that's why the product led are throughout products and portfolios. Actually, we are even past that product led. We are thinking portfolio led transformations, because we do want to align these products under portfolios to make sure that, we're thinking big picture here. And to give you an example, for big organizations, like they have an account opening for all of their business lines, right? Small business, like in financial services, and retail account opening and all that. If you look on their website, every time you open an account, it's going to look different for you as a customer. Why? Because that mimics how they work, the structure of the organization. They are not portfolios, they are basically product organizations and siloed organizations. So when I create my small business account, I have a green screen with all these things, and asking me different questions and putting in my information again, that I'm already a client, and why are you asking me for the same information? I open an account for my my retail side or my credit card again, different colors, different things to ask me. So we can see that is there a need for more of that integration when it's coming to these transformations, and tackle it differently.
Yeah, definitely. And from some of our peers and partners, they'll even beg and argue about transformation. It's really even evolution. Transformation means that there's an ending and change never ends, right? So there's that whole
Hmm.
other conversation. Now, as we wrap up, we wanted to talk about we will not have a show until December 1st. So we're gearing up to a shift here on the Game Changing Work Show, where we're going to do twice a month on shows instead of our weekly schedule here. So thank you, everyone, for coming. I know, Gert, you had a couple of awesome comments here. Your last comment about teams wanting to be inspired, knowing why, and with the vision to take ownership of the value they deliver, right? And just building feature to someone else. And so definitely. I think this is probably the tip of the iceberg of this conversation. And I do hope that you come back. We'll probably have to figure out an interesting topic. Any of you that are watching today or the replay, I would love to learn, what do you want to peel the onion further when it comes to this outcome centric product, all of the things that we've been mentioning today on the show, because we're not done. We're not done, folks,
We're
talking
just
about these
getting
subjects.
started. So,
We're getting revved up for
exactly.
2022. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And I hope that you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.